Writing an assassin character is a balancing act between writing a character who is simply a dark and brooding edgelord and a character who is too relatable to actually be an assassin. Being an assassin should take a toll on your character. If your assassin is a bubbly, happy-go-lucky character, then they are probably completely insane, and that might work for a side character, but it doesn't work well for a character that you really want to delve into. You want to examine the parts of your character that are influenced by their profession. There are some stories where there are very compelling characters who happen to be assassins, but the fact that they are assassins is not an essential or defining characteristic. In contrast, there are also assassins where the fact that they're an assassin is such a defining characteristic that their personality is eclipsed entirely by their role. We're going to begin by looking at two examples of this from the opposite extremes, where the assassin characters are written poorly in two different series of novels. So our first example is going to be the edgelord character from Brent Week's Night Angel trilogy. Now, I've only read the first book in this series because I really didn't like it, and our example character is Azoth, or Kalar, the same person, the main character, and also his mentor Durzo, who are both just terribly gloomy characters that are difficult to enjoy reading about. Kalar and Durzo are miserable, nihilistic, cynical, and very emo. Neither of them are very well developed, because Durzo has become consumed with the misery of his dark past, but he doesn't have any problems in the present because he has the ability to kill anyone that he wants and get away with it. Kalar despises his mentor because Durzo is cruel and heartless, and refuses to acknowledge that wet boys are the kind of assassins that reside in this world. Assassins with superpowers can have emotional connections and use their abilities to protect those they care about, which Kalar rightly realizes is the purpose of living. But because Durzo has taken him out of a terrible situation from his childhood, he's resistant to killing Durzo. And also he's of course afraid of him because Durzo's this incredible master assassin. So, Kalar's life is miserable throughout the entire book, and we the readers get to share his impotence and misery with him throughout the entire run of the book. This is thematically linked with his incredible reserve of magic power that he can't use. So, lots of frustration. The frustration is very well communicated. On the practical side of depicting assassination, there is one excellent scene in The Way of Shadows where Durzo kills someone near the end of the story in a really creative way, where he makes his target look like he's going insane and then commits mass suicide, killing himself and a bunch of other people. So there is a discussion earlier in the book where Durzo explains this is why he's so invaluable. This is a common theme in assassin stories where the assassin isn't just there to kill someone. They're there to kill someone in a way where their client can get away with it because there's a reasonable explanation of the death of the target. It's not just like they were killed by someone and then there are obvious people who may have hired assassins to take care of them. It's like, oh no, he committed suicide, or they were killed in a way where there's no evidence to tie either the assassin or the client to anything that was done. So creative assassinations were one of the reasons why I picked up this book to begin with, and in this particular scene, Brent Weeks delivers. It's written in a way that demonstrates the skill and intelligence of Durzo, as well as creative use of his tools and powers. So it's a realistic depiction of how an assassin could kill someone who is high profile in a way where they could get away with it and no one suspect anything. Just as a side note, the arsenal of weaponry that Durzo and his apprentice have in The Way of Shadows is way too much. They're way too powerful. They have contact poisons that will kill their targets in a matter of seconds if they just touch the substance, which makes it just really easy to kill anyone. If they coat their weapons in these things, anyone dies within a couple of seconds of just a smidge of poison being put on them. They can put it on door handles. It's not interesting because there's no reason why anyone would be able to defeat these people. And also, Kyler has access to these contact poisons, it appears. He goes on jobs with Durzo, and I think separate from Durzo, where he has access to contact poisons. And Kyler hates Durzo. So the likelihood of Durzo surviving with a resentful apprentice who has access to this level of, a couple seconds death on contact is not good writing. There are too many things that could go wrong. There's not a lot of drama where you can kill someone that easily. The extreme opposite of the Way of Shadows' method of making the characters too assassin and not enough people is the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb. The Farseer trilogy is a very good series of novels, and I would recommend it, but not if you're looking for a series where being an assassin is an essential point of the plot. In the first book, Assassin's Apprentice, the main character Fitz is a very well-realized character who is extremely human and sympathetic. However, it is almost irrelevant that he's an assassin. For a trilogy that has assassin in all of the titles, being an assassin is more of a day job for Fitz than a defining part of his identity. Fitz would be just as interesting a character if he weren't an assassin at all. I think of Fitz as the son of chivalry, a practitioner of two different kinds of magic, a loyal friend, a very, very unlucky man, and a dog lover before I think of him as an assassin. This isn't a problem with the story per se, unless you were really hoping for an assassin story when you picked up the series, in which case you might think the titles are false advertising. That's not to say that there aren't some very interesting insights into the world of assassinations and politics in the book. It's just that the story doesn't linger on them, which is a shame. There's an idea in the first book that you don't even need to kill someone in order to remove them as a political threat. And this is discussed as a throwaway line. The idea that you could marry someone off to some noblewoman or nobleman, and that would dull their ambitions, or by giving them a title or an office that will occupy their time and satiate some of their desire for power, or simply by offering them a bribe to fulfill some of their other desires and goals rather than needing to seek power, is a fascinating idea. I would read an entire series about diplomat assassins that only kill the role of the person they are assassinating rather than the assassin themselves. A pacifist assassin story would just be incredible. What a great idea. Unfortunately, in Assassin's Apprentice, it's not explored at all, it's just kind of mentioned. But super cool idea. As for Fitz's abilities, the two contrasting forms of magic that he practices, the wit and the skill, are not particularly original, but they fit the world really well, and they show the different sides of his character very nicely. For those of you who haven't read the series, he's basically a mixture of a wizard and a druid. He can talk to dogs telepathically, but he also went to a wizard academy where he learned how to do more traditional wizardy magic. So talking to animals, but also the academic kind of things. There's no problems with this within the context of the books, but they're not very assassin-y, just like most other things in this book. And what's really not very assassin-like is in the second book, Royal Assassin, Fitz gives up on trying to learn swordplay or any other subtle blades, and part of the story is that he just rides out and kills groups of zombies with an axe in like brutal barbarian fashion. So honestly, I'm only talking about these books within the context of this video because of the names. Assassins are not central to the story, though the series is worth checking out for other reasons. Okay, let's talk about good examples of assassins from books. Our first example of a good assassin is Milady from The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas. It seems silly to do a spoiler warning for The Three Musketeers considering it was published in 1844, but the story is way better if you don't know what happens in this part, so I will leave a timestamp if you want to skip this section and read The Three Musketeers. Or if you can find a movie version that accurately tells the story, which about a third of them do, maybe half. But yeah, lots of variation in the movie versions. Milady is more of an agent over the course of the whole novel than an assassin, but in the last part of the book, she is tasked with assassinating the Duke of Buckingham. And it's a really good example of how to meld a character's personality with their assassin abilities. So, Milady gets captured while attempting to assassinate Buckingham, and she is guarded over by John Felton, who is a man who has no interest in her charms, because Milady is a very beautiful woman who she's very charismatic and manipulative, and so at first she tries to seduce her guard, but that doesn't work. So she does something really interesting. She seduces him with his morality. So she convinces him that she has been wronged by Buckingham, and that the right moral and virtuous thing to do is for her guard to assassinate her target for her, which is just, it's brilliant, and it fits perfectly with her character, because we learn about why she is the way she is. We learn why she's so manipulative later on in the story, because she has a personal connection to one of our heroes. Because of her backstory and the fact that she was betrayed by Athos, one of the Three Musketeers, she operates in a very cold, cynical way, and you can see the influence of her past in the way that she operates in the present and what makes her such a good assassin. Milady is a survivor. She always lands on her feet, and she knows that she can't rely on anyone to help her. So she takes whatever measures necessary in order to protect herself, including really cynical, dark ways that involve twisting the morals of others and taking the lives of those that she needs to in order to complete her goals. She's not an effective assassin because of her training or because that's her job. She's an effective assassin because her life has given her the skills and mindset necessary to be a great assassin. Now, we can't have a video talking about literary assassins without talking about Jason Bourne. Bourne is one of my favorite examples of an assassin from literature, and I've only read The Bourne Identity so far, but Bourne really is the perfect blend of a character and an assassin. Ludlum understands that his audience is reading his story because assassins are cool, and they want to understand the mindset of someone who kills as a way of life. But he also makes Bourne a character who we come to sympathize with and see as a human over the course of the book. Bourne is a very cold character, in contrast to his on-screen portrayal by Matt Damon. But this actually strengthens both his character and the believability of his assassin past. When you start to see him make decisions that are not only about survival and the relationship that he begins to form with Marie, it's very clear that there is a good person buried beneath the shell of a man who has been turned into a weapon. It's also worth noting that Marie in the book is way different than she is in the movie. Marie in the movie is a fairly normal person who gets caught up in this world. She just recovers a little bit quicker from a lot of people. Marie in the book is very cold, very logical, and adapts to being kidnapped by Bourne in pretty brutal fashion in a remarkable way, which is what makes her a great counterpart to Bourne, a great supporting character, because she immediately jumps to conclusions that most people wouldn't. She makes very logical choices in really bad situations, and she doesn't break down easily at all. My absolute favorite assassin from a novel is Szeth Sun Valino, Truthless of Shinovar, from the Stormlight Archive. Szeth, like Milady and Bourne, is a broken person, but unlike Milady, you can see from his perspective that he is redeemable. De Winter and Szeth are both victims of their past, but while Milady embraces her path as a hired killer, Szeth despises it. He despises those who don't have the skill to stop him, and most of all, he despises himself. This sounds like another example of an overly edgy assassin, as I described in the first part of this video, but what sets Szeth apart from Durzo is that Szeth holds to his path out of a higher ideal. Szeth believes that he has to kill people at the whims of others because his culture and religion demand it. He kills so that he can earn a place in hell, because otherwise his soul or identity will fade away entirely. And he believes that hell is preferable to annihilation. As the story goes on, you can see Szeth start to change his position and understanding of the world, but strangely, his role as an assassin is defined by his sense of honor and nobility, that he believes that this is the correct moral duty for him to perform this role and be a disgusting, immoral character in order to fulfill that ideal. Comparing the skills of Born and Szeth, I think that Born's skills are perfect for an assassin character that lives in a world with no magic. At least no fantasy magic, maybe plot magic. Born is the ultimate spy, special forces operative. Ludlum's description of his abilities and how he uses them are perfect for the story that he's trying to tell. Born is just believable enough to not be unrealistic, but he's also better than everyone else he comes across in the story, and amnesia is his only real weakness. Szeth's skills are not those of a traditional assassin. Usually, I would say that when one is writing an assassin, the best thing to do is to give your assassins based upon what would be most practical and effective for their job. So that would include the ability to be stealthy, kill targets with minimal interference, and possibly place the blame on someone else. Szeth doesn't care about any of that. Szeth shows up, kills everyone that he needs to, finishes off his target, and then leaves, because no one can stop him. And this adds to his character as well, because he actually hopes that the guards, someone has the skill to take him down and kill him. And that's another element to his resentment towards the world, is that Szeth wants to die, but he's not allowed to make it easy. He's not allowed to kill himself. So he's hoping that there's always someone more skilled than he is, so that he doesn't have to keep doing what he's doing. Why I like Szeth better than Born from a character standpoint, Born is able to escape his life as an assassin by the kind of lucky situation of amnesia, which is a really important part of the book, and obviously it wouldn't work otherwise. But Born is able to explore his morality from a kind of a blank slate position, whereas Szeth is horribly aware of all his choices, and therefore he has to take responsibility for them. Born is in a situation where he's allowed to start life over, whereas Szeth, if he's going to escape his terrible life, is obligated to make those decisions himself. I brought up in my last Assassins video the contrast between Jubal Early and the Operative in Firefly and Serenity, and I wanted to touch on that again. So these characters are really good to contrast because they have such similar goals. They're very similar characters. They're written by the same person. And this is actually something that I'd like to talk about in a later video, which is if you read or watch the works of a specific person, whether it be a director or a show writer or a book author, then you're able to see how they play with ideas over time and incorporate their characters and make alterations and see how different versions of those characters come out over their whole body of work. With Jubal Early and the Operative, you can see this a lot in Whedon's work and Joss Whedon's work. These characters are very similar in a lot of ways, but also significantly distinct in that Jubal Early is not meant to be related to. His philosophy is really interesting. The way that he expresses his philosophy is really unique to the character, but it's always meant to be kind of unsettling. It's always kind of meant to be there as a way of throwing off the audience. And even if you relate to some of the existential themes and you're able to understand them, it's very difficult to look at Jubal Early as anything other than a villain, especially after his scene with Kaylee. The same is true of the Operative, and I know that many people view the Operative as exactly the same way, more or less. But when you look at the Operative's view of morality, it's also terrible. He's obviously, a terrible person, and he knows it, but the distinction is that Jubal Early is a little bit off kilter. He's a little bit strange. All of his interactions are meant to be in contrast to the crew of Serenity. Whereas with the Operative, you end up in a situation where you can see where he's coming from, and Mal, he's meant to contrast the way that Mal sees the world, but Mal is able to understand him and play off of his morality in a way where the character changes based upon Mal's engagement with the Operative's sense of the way the universe should be. I think that this is a good way, if you're thinking specifically about writing villain characters, if you want to make an assassin who's trying to capture or kill one of your heroes, and you want to make them just really unsettling and a good memorable villain that will stick in your audience's minds, then you want to write them like Jubal Early, who is extremely competent, he's extremely dangerous, he can kind of read the heroes, he's able to adjust his behavior to fight them, but he's not there to be related to. He's there to be scary. Whereas if you want to write a character who can be related to, the operative is also very dangerous, but the operative actually loses to the heroes more as the story goes on. He'll do things that impact the characters, but for the most part, Mal actually defeats his plans pretty regularly. He loses early in the story, whereas Jubal Early does not lose to the end. He defeats all of the crew, and that's what makes him scary. He's extremely competent. Whereas the operative is competent, yes, but what's scarier about him is that he has this idealistic view of the world, and you know that he's never going to stop because he is the hero in his story. And I think that makes him a lot easier to relate to. I think that his sense of trying to make a world without sin is a really interesting way of writing an assassin as a character, as opposed to simply as an obstacle for your heroes to defeat. So if you're writing a story with an important assassin character, the most important thing to keep in mind is this. Assassins have to have sacrificed some of their humanity, and the audience has to accept that loss of humanity while still connecting to the character. Not every character who is a soldier, a criminal, a run-of-the-mill killer has to have noticeably lost some of their humanity. But an assassin should have to have a certain change in mindset due to trauma, cynicism, or even psychopathy, because they're not killing in self-defense, or they're not killing the enemies of their country or tribe. They're killing specific individuals. The job of an assassin is to kill a single target, and they should not be able to divorce the person from that target, from their job, unless there's something very wrong with them. Dehumanizing someone that you have studied, and perhaps gotten to know, while also planning to kill them in a way where they're unable to defend themselves, takes a certain sort of mindset that should be unsettling to your readers. When one has chosen to make their area of expertise killing those they have gotten to know well, it turns you into something that most people can't understand. And that's what a writer should be trying to explore when they're bringing an assassin character who is important to the story into their narrative.